The Guardian clearly has a vendetta against the voluntary carbon markets. Last year, they released an article about the vast majority of Verra's issued REDD+ offsets being worthless. And they're not the only ones. There have been a variety of studies and media hit pieces targeting Verra. Now the Guardian's releasing another article about Cookstove projects overstating their offsetting numbers by 1000%. This means they think all the carbon projects are not actually reducing much of the CO2 emissions going into the atmosphere. In this video, we'll go over the REDD+ and Cookstove projects in question, the claims made against them by these scientific studies, how accurate these claims are, and what the carbon registries have been doing to solve some of the concerns about carbon offset overcrediting. We'll start off by talking about REDD+, because REDD's been the subject of most of the controversy in the voluntary carbon markets. REDD stands for Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation. Essentially, these are just the methods surrounding the prevention of deforestation. As of November 2023, REDD+ projects contributed 24% of the total offsets issued in the VCMs. So if it turns out most of these offsets were actually not making an impact on fighting climate change, that's a big deal. The Guardian cited investigative work from their own organization, the German news organization Der Zeit, and another nonprofit journalist site Source Material. They talk about the findings of two groups of researchers that studied 69 REDD+ projects. Out of the 238 of the total REDD+ projects currently verified, this is significant. So what did the studies find? One group of researchers that studied 29 projects found that 21 of them had essentially no benefit to the climate. 7 had overestimated their impact, and 1 was doing more for the environment than they claimed. The other study of 40 projects had similar results, where most projects had no impact on the environment, and just a handful of them were responsible for all the ecological benefits. Out of the 94.9 million carbon offsets that were claimed, the Guardian found that only 5.5 million of the emissions were actually reduced. So the allegations here were that over 90% of the emissions claimed actually just went into the atmosphere anyway. We'll get into how accurate these studies were in a minute, but what's the primary issue with these projects? The studies say it involves a concept called baselines. A baseline or reference area is used in carbon projects to figure out what would have happened to the area if the carbon project didn't exist at all. So in the case of REDD+ projects, these projects will use a similar area nearby as a baseline to figure out how much deforestation would have happened if the carbon developer wasn't protecting the area at all. So the Guardian highlighted this project in the Amazon as an example, which used a reference area that included a town and major roads. This would make it look like the deforestation rate in the area was higher than it really is if they actually used a proper baseline, also they could get more offsets. Verra, the carbon registry that verified these projects, disputed the study's claims by saying the scientists couldn't truly capture the impact on the ground in their simulations. In Verra's own findings, they argued against the studies, saying they ignored key deforestation factors, compared projects to synthetic controls and baselines that were under no serious threat of deforestation, and used datasets that weren't meant for tracking deforestation at all. Of course, Verra has a vested interest in fighting back against these allegations. Even if Verra is right in their criticisms of these studies, various independent third-party rating agencies in the carbon markets are in agreement that Verra's methodologies are insufficient. Donna Lee, the co-founder of Calyx Global, a carbon offset rating platform, has said that the majority of REDD+ and renewable energy offsets were low quality. In a response to the Guardian's article, Silvera, another offset rating service, put out a response saying that they found 70% of the offsets had issues, which is still not great, but certainly better than the Guardian's claim of 94%. Elias Avery, the co-founder and chief science officer of Renoster, another rating agency, looked into one of the studies the Guardian cited and found in his own analysis that 75% of the offsets were likely invalid. Again, not a great number, but it's not 94%. So if all these third parties are saying your methodology has issues, it probably has issues. Media outlets like The Guardian are keen on misrepresenting scientific studies or using faulty analysis to over-dramatize the results. It's clear that radical environmentalists are hostile toward the carbon markets and see the whole space as greenwashing. Yet they don't want it to succeed, so there's an obvious agenda behind these articles, and with that said, they are right about a majority of the projects having issues. With all this backlash, Verra has taken various studies into consideration, including another one that The Guardian cited to craft a new methodology for REDD. That new methodology was released in November of last year, and it combines 5 separate methodologies related to preventing deforestation into one refined blueprint. The primary change to this methodology is with the main issues addressed in all these studies, baselines. In this new version, Verra will now be the ones to lead the creation of project baselines, and they'll calculate the baselines and provide the necessary data to assess deforestation risk in the region of the project. Data including the use of satellites, drones, and remote sensing. So is this going to bring enough credibility back to REDD offsets? I'm not sure yet. I think that still remains to be seen, but it is encouraging to see that Verra is making progress in improving these processes, which is ultimately necessary if demand is going to continue to grow. The market participants have to trust that the offsets they're buying are legit. Shifting gears and speaking of trust, there's another methodology in the carbon markets that's been under fire recently. The reduction of CO2 emissions into the atmosphere by the proliferation of higher efficiency cookstoves. In theory, the usage of these cookstoves reduces the amount of fuel needed to cook in developing regions of the world. So that means they need to cut down less trees or other possible fuel sources. This leads to less emissions. Well, The Guardian was back at it again with another article about cookstoves overstating their benefits to the environment by 1,000%. The study mentioned estimates that the projects sampled were given 9.2 times as many offsets as they should be getting. The study was conducted on 51 projects that equated to 40% of all the offsets issued in the voluntary carbon markets by Cookstove projects. As of November 2023, there were 1,325 projects in total, and they're estimated to have issued 5% of the total number of offsets that have been issued in the VCMs. So this is a decently large segment of the carbon markets. Both Verra and Gold Standard, the two largest carbon registries, disputed the findings of the study. Gold Standard was quoted saying, "It must be stressed that the study neither studied nor found overestimation. The evidence provided does not back the conclusions drawn, which are at odds with the wider academic literature and expert view on this subject." In an open letter written by a variety of carbon developers or experts in the Cookstove space, the organizations laid out a plethora of concerns with the study The Guardian cited. This included unsubstantiated assumptions about the design of the projects or the target populations, an incomplete and selective review of the academic findings, unrepresentative sampling due to the study focusing on the largest projects by quantity, and a possible conflict of interest with the company that funded the study. The carbon registries have already demonstrated that they're open to changing their methodologies if the science suggests they should. So, are there issues with some Cookstove projects as well? It's likely. But that's why these organizations continue to improve their methodologies. Overall, it's a net positive that the carbon markets are being heavily scrutinized, even if the studies have flaws, because it ensures that the registries have to continue to grow. Verra already has new methodologies being released for cookstoves, rice production, and more, in parallel with the work they're already doing on the REDD side. So the sector is only going to tighten restrictions and oversight as time goes on. We shouldn't mark the carbon markets off as greenwashing and throw them away. They'll be a necessary part of reaching net zero, that's a guarantee. So are there issues with overcrediting? Yes, but methodologies will continue to improve. We also have third parties working to refine these projects like the Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Markets, also known as ICVCM. They're an independent standards body in the carbon markets that have developed the core carbon principles. These are 10 different criteria that every carbon project should follow to get a CCP verified label on their offsets, which is already causing some offsets to trade at a premium to offsets that don't have this label. Something interesting to note is that Verra is not allowing offsets verified under their old methodologies to qualify for this label. That is, unless they revalidate under the new methodology. This will affect many of the old REDD Plus and Cookstove offsets. According to research from Calix Global, this will likely lead to the exclusion of the majority of low-quality offsets from these methodologies. In combination, REDD Plus and Cookstoves make up 30% of the market, so this could be a massive supply shock if these turn out to be worthless. There will be a low amount of offsets available as demand is only forecasted to continue to grow. So all this controversy might actually work out quite well for the higher quality projects that remain. If you're interested in investing in the voluntary carbon markets, I talk about many of the possible investment options on this channel, so check it out if that sounds appealing, and thanks for watching.